We have Peter Gallo with us today. Thank you so much. So Peter is a seasoned civil engineer and land development expert with more than 4 decades of experience shaping projects across Florida and beyond. As president of Land Plan Engineering Group, he has led the design, permitting, and execution of major residential, commercial, and municipal developments, bringing a deep understanding of infrastructure, zoning, and the full development process. With a career spanning engineering, planning, and project manager, Peter offers practical insight into what it really takes to move land from concept to completion. What is one project early in your career that really shaped how you approach land entitlement work today and that made you dive into this amazing industry?
After graduating from college, I went to work for Wolpert Consultants in Dayton, Ohio. At that time, Wolpert had about 200 people, and I was lucky enough to get an internship with them and started working with them as a project manager, land developing. Back in those days, we didn't have all of these fancy computers. I ended up working on a type machine with the green tape, you may remember, to feed data into a portable computer. So you have to send that tape to Cleveland, and then they would process it and send it back to you in the mail. So it took you a week to see if it had any errors on it. So that's how old I am. But I've been working with land development projects for a long time. Moved to New Jersey back in the 70s with Abington A Associates, which was another large engineering firm in New Jersey. We did all the Exxons and Mobil stations and McDonald's throughout the state of Florida, which meant many nights out going to planning board meetings and council meetings to get those projects approved. The main project that I worked on in New Jersey was called Lemaire, or the Kaplan organization, which was a large builder at that time. It was 1,500 units on the side of a hill overlooking the Garden State Parkway just south of the Raritan River. And you'll see it anytime you drive north on the Garden State Parkway to New York City. You'll see this project on the side of the mountain, which was very challenging back then, but very large project. Took a lot of getting permits and facilitating the construction over many years. So it was a major project that I worked on in New Jersey that kind of got me hooked on, doing the land development thing and getting the permits and working with all kinds of people, the attorneys, the construction people, everybody that is involved with land development. It was a pretty significant project in my career.
That's exciting. How many acres was it, more or less? You remember?
450 acres, but that included a significant amount of wetlands because it was, right at the base of the Raritan River. So it had a marsh and a meadow, and then it started going up on the side of the cliff, and that's where all the houses were constructed. And they were apartments, they were townhouses, no single families, just a very, very mixed use of housing at that time. And it was pretty significant throughout the state of New Jersey.
And when you look at a raw piece of land, what are the 2 or 3 things that you evaluate to make sure that it's viable or not?
Well, the things I look at right away are the zoning of the property, what you're allowed to construct on that property, environmental issues, wetlands, endangered species, those type of things, which you can do mostly online now, and also contaminated soils. That's another big issue that would stop the development of the property. So I look for fatal flaws that are going to stop the project in its tracks, and that can happen relatively quickly within 2 or 3 days. I can analyze that and make sure that we don't have any issues that are going to come up during the permitting. Once we pass that phase, we usually go into a due diligence phase, and it's very worthwhile to do that because it may be a little outpour of money at that time, but it's well worth it to find out whether or not you're going to continue working on the project, because without knowing the environmental issues and the wetlands and those type of things, it's hard to move forward with design.
Let's talk about a current deal that we're working on, for example, in Lake Wales. What were the biggest entitlement or engineering challenges we uncovered early on, and what are your thoughts about it, just to talk about something that is going on nowadays?
On that project up in Lake Wales, it wasn't so much the environmental issues because it was really a cypress field, orange grove, and most of it is open, growing fields, so it wasn't too much of an environmental issue. What I would never expect is we had a problem with water and sewer, but that's pretty typical up in the central part of Florida where you don't have water and sewer services available to the property. So we were happy to find out that, this is the second phase of a project. The first phase was already constructed and existing. It had a water and wastewater treatment plant as part of the first phase. And you would have thought that they would have sized the plant for the entire project as anticipated, but it was just designed for the first phase. So we come to find out that really we can't use the existing water and sewer treatment plant because it doesn't have capacity. So we're looking at putting in a new water and sewer treatment plant facility to service the project.
I love what we do so much. You learn something new every day, which I didn't know is that you could bring like a third party to be a part of the project and take care of the water facility and be sort of like a private company that owns the water, and then all the owners will pay the water to that company, correct?
There are, private utility companies that do this for a living. They'll come in and assume the debt and the construction of the water and wastewater package plants. They're a lot more sophisticated at this time because they're very small. They don't take up more than an acre to build the facilities. Of course, you do need discharge. With the laws the way they are right now, you're looking at putting in a septic field, which may take anywhere from 3 acres to 4 acres for 300 units. So it does cost a little land, but that's the only alternative that's available to service the project with water and sewer. So
very interesting. It solves the problem because all of a sudden you're looking at, I don't know, like a $7 million investment that you are not, that could make or break your deal if you don't have this sort of solution for it.
The good news is, the companies that do this obviously charge, water and sewer fee to the people using the facilities. So if you figure that you got 400 people paying, $300-400 a month in utility bills, then, after about 6 or 7 years, the facility is paid off and you get the rest of the revenue for the rest of your life. So it's not a bad deal for them.
How does working within or near a more urban environment change your approach compared to a place like Lake Wales?
When you're dealing in an urban area, usually water and sewer is not a particular problem with the project. What you run into in urban areas is really the zoning and the zoning changes and those type of things that go along with the project. If it doesn't have the proper zoning for what you're planning on doing, you're looking at a rezoning of the property. And as you know, there's no entitlements for your rezoning, just a political issue that you have to deal with. And hopefully you can gain the support of your surrounding neighbors to go along with the development, because the council people usually tend to listen to the adjacent neighbors and what their feelings are and what their situation is. So it takes a little marketing and a little bit of making sure the neighbors are happy before you move forward with a project in the urban area.
In examples like that, what are the few key hurdles that developers often underestimate when trying to get a project approved?
Basically, they don't understand the timing. If you're going to buy the property outright and have to carry it, they don't quite understand how long it takes to get the permits down in Florida here. It's pretty significant timing. You're looking at anywhere from 9 months to 12 months in getting an approval, and those are costs that you have to figure into the project. And then there's no guarantees that the zoning and the land use and all of those things are going to be taken care of. So it's a pretty significant outlay to get the project started, and then also the carrying costs associated with the timing. Both the seller and the buyer need to understand that there is a certain amount of time that's required in order to get site plan approval to move forward.
You know what, I had a phone call this morning from a developer of single family homes, small projects, and he just wanted my opinion on prices of land here, which when we discussed it, he was like, couldn't believe it. And then we talked about that, and I said, and remember that you got to take into consideration when you're looking at a project here, minimum 1-2 years of entitlement process when you're looking at raw land. He said that he could get an approval in a couple of weeks. I was like, not here. And from your perspective, Peter, what is one mistake that you consistently see investors or brokers make when they do not involve an engineer early enough on the project?
If you're looking at a raw piece of land, I would highly encourage people to get with an engineer to at least get their evaluation of the property. That probably would come at no cost. But, once they tell you yes or no, there's no fatal flaws, the due diligence phase would kick in. And that's something that a developer should, and most of them do, due diligence analysis before they ever move forward with the project.
What are the key people? So you definitely need an engineer, a developer. You usually hire, obviously a surveyor. What are the other 2 or 3 main resources that you involve also?
You need to have an environmentalist involved. Like I said, for the wetlands and the environmental features, whether it be, fish and wildlife or some other type of endangered species. So you need to make sure that there's an environmentalist involved at the beginning of the project. And geotech is another big thing. A major cost of construction is always the fill and the land situation as far as the geotech is concerned. So geotechnical engineering is very important to the beginning and success of a project. Moving forward with site plan approval, you'll need an architect and a landscape architect to design the product that you're trying to produce. So those are the main things. Traffic engineering comes in also, depending on the size and the scope of the project. So there's a lot of people involved in the land development process that have to be coordinated.
Do you usually involve lighting engineers, architects in residential multifamily projects? I know that we had it on a warehouse project, but do you need those also in residential multifamily projects?
Yes, lighting is usually part of the architectural services that we get for a project. Most cities now require that for site plan approval, so it's not unusual, but yes, lighting is part of the overall package that has to be submitted for approval.
Can you share a story from one of our recent deals where engineering insight either saved the deal or completely changed the direction?
Most recently is I was working for an industrial developer, and he came to me with a piece of property that he had purchased, about 200 acres for industrial site. He bought an existing landfill. We were putting a warehouse facility on the landfill. There was many challenges, but the one he couldn't resolve was the fact he couldn't get any utilities on the property because the landfill is so shallow. We really couldn't put the normal water, sewer, paving, and drainage for the property. So I came up with a solution where we put in the utilities no deeper than 3 feet, which meant that we had to put in the water line as close as possible to the surface. The sewer line, we could not use sanitary sewer. We had to use injector stations, for every 2 buildings with a force main that we also kept less than 4 feet deep. And then the drainage, we couldn't put any drainage down. So I designed swales going around the outside of the project and between the buildings to handle the stormwater so that there was no underground sanit or storm sewer. So it was a pretty innovative design in order to make the project buildable. I did get a bottle of wine for that, so it was well worth it.
How do you see the entitlement timelines, regulations, or engineer constraints evolving in Central Florida over the next few years? I mean, I keep hearing all these horror stories that I feel like instead of, with all this technology that we have available today, I would think that we would be improving our timelines, and I just see that they're just getting longer and longer.
I think really what's going to happen is up in Central Florida right now, it's pretty simple dealing with the city and working with Lake Wales. Dealing in a small community like that, it's really pretty simple to work with the folks and try to get something accomplished. But I think over the years, everything's going to get more and more sophisticated. It's going to get more checklists and more things that have to be submitted to the city. So I think that it's just going to get worse in Central Florida. It'll probably catch up to, Southern Florida pretty quickly because everybody's concerned about the environment. Everybody's concerned about the quality of life, traffic. All of those issues are going to be brought to Central Florida because obviously that's where the development is going to go. So I see it really catching up with the rest of the state pretty quickly.
Well, Peter, thank you so much for being with us today. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate the time. Thank you, Monica.